Hey random stranger, I think I've cracked the show. Today I am going to present you with my crackpot theories as to why I think QUBEEYY and this whole magical girl system is super sus, and then afterwards we will just watch episodes 3 and 4. Keep at it in the comment section. I have already learned so much from you guys, including the fact that the script writer and the music scorer for both Fate Zero and Madoka are the same people, which made things make so much more sense in my head. To kick things off, QUBEEYY's explanation of the magical girl system was presented as this really suspiciously neat dichotomy. Magical girls are born from wishes and spread hope, and then witches are born from curses and they spread despair. You know, it's this very black and white framing. Definitely felt way too simple because it raises questions about causation versus correlation. So QUBEEYY and Mami, who I have to assume was fed these beliefs about reality from QUBEEYY, claimed that witches cause various social problems like suicides and murders and bouts of violence. But the question is, are witches really the cause of human suffering, or are they the manifestations of despair that already existed in the first place? If negative emotions or curses create witches, then claiming that witches cause negative emotions that eat away at humans on the inside creates a sort of circular logic that I feel obscures the true source of suffering. It's kind of even more sus when we consider how a magical girl's soul gem and a witch's grief seed relate to each other. After the magical girls fight the witches, their soul gem darkens, and it seems like it needs to be purified by transferring the corruption from the soul gem to a witch's grief seed. Mami had this almost like clinical explanation of how, this is just how magical girls restore our magical powers. But I think it did raise a more disturbing possibility, which is that a grief seed could just be a soul gem that never had a chance to have the corruption transferred away from it, which would suggest then that a witch was or still is a magical girl who, for whatever reason, fell into or was trapped in a cycle of despair. They aren't just these evil beings that are lashing out for no reason. So this very like transactional framing of grief seeds being these rewards for witch hunts, I think actually covers up and sanitizes what appears to be a more disturbing transfer of the emotional or spiritual darkness that infects the soul gem to something or someone who once used to be just like Mami or just like Sayaka and Madoka. There was something also uncomfortable about Mami's use of the term witch hunt, which reminded me of all of the historical persecution of mostly women that took place during the 14th to the 18th centuries, where societies would blame things like illness and death and other unexplainable phenomena that they didn't understand on innocent women. And in the same way, I felt like by positioning these witches as hidden evil beings who manipulate human emotions from the shadows, QUBEEYY and Mami make these assertions that we kind of just have to take by faith. You know, it sets up this system where magical girls are the good guys fighting the bad guys, the witches, and it really floats over or kind of dismisses the idea of there being a much more complex and possibly cyclical system of suffering at work. I did notice that in both Madoka's dream sequence at the start of episode 1 and the witch labyrinths, there were these very like strikingly similar visual elements that I think also challenge the simplistic good versus evil, magical girls versus witches dichotomy as told to us by QUBEEYY. Side note, I actually think each circle in Madoka's dream sequence actually represents a witch who used to be a magical girl but who are now trapped in a cycle of despair. But we can get into that later. The bird that was in Madoka's dream, birds usually represent freedom and hope and this ability to transcend your limitations. But the bird in Madoka's dream was caught in these like geometric patterns that also appear a lot in the Witch's Labyrinth. And I think that these, mathematically precise, very rigid geometric patterns represent potentially systems of control that impose uniformity and suppress individual agency. So just as Qubey's contract, which we will also talk about later in detail, offers power and like a wish, while I think concealing the true cost of becoming a magical girl, one of which I actually feel is being forced to fight until your soul gem basically blackens out into a grief seed and then you turn into a witch. That visual of a bird trapped in a ring of geometric patterns present both freedom and imprisonment in the one image. And because those same geometric patterns show up in the witch labyrinth too, it suggests that witches may also be trapped in that same system. The buildings falling apart in Madoka's dream too. When I looked more closely at it, they were for the most part not actually just randomly exploding. You know, they seem to be in the process of being like systematically dismantled or like methodically deconstructed, taken apart piece by piece. And I think that the show is trying to tell us something important. For one, Madoka's understanding of her reality, as well as her neat categories of good and evil that both Qubey and Mami are feeding her, that they are about to be systematically dismantled, just like those buildings. Same with us, the audience. Like what we think we know about magical girl shows could be in the process of being at least partially deconstructed. Although paradoxically, you know, deconstruction can also be a process of breaking down in order to create space for something new to take its place. So let's just break down the visual assault that was the Witch's Labyrinth. The first thing to point out is that they're not just weird for weirdness' sake. There's definitely a method to the madness. Secondly, it was fascinating to see how the Witches' Labyrinths channel surrealist techniques to portray someone's, probably the witch's, experience of trauma. So just stay with me here. So Surrealism came out of World War I when artists like Salvador Dali and René Magritte and Max Ernst came up with these new visual styles to express the psychological trauma that was caused by World War I and the horrors of industrial warfare, something that they felt that conventional or traditional art was incapable of conveying. Likewise, if you look at the Witches' Labyrinths, they are also packed with these very strange visual motifs that I think ultimately show how trauma fragments someone's sense of self and identity. So each symbolic element serves a specific purpose. You have these crowned butterflies that represent obviously transformation or metamorphosis into something with added authority or power. And it made me think of how magical girls really are just normal girls, but then they're transformed and given immense power. The Parisian, like also very 19th century European imagery brings to mind a period of social upheaval when industrialization and modern bureaucracy as an institution really blossomed. You had like the rise of assembly lines when people shifted en masse from individual craft production to essentially becoming just cogs in a much larger industrial machine. I think the faceless figures in carriages symbolize how those systems, while they promised, you know, modernity and progress, they also created a sense of alienation and like a loss of identity. The cotton ball people I found like especially disturbing. They're essentially like these humans reduced to grotesque forms with these black hole eyes that I think suggest very deep psychological distress due to those new forms of alienation. And you know what was even creepier is that at the end of episode 2, Madoka's drawing of herself looked so similar to those like cotton ball people with eyes. It definitely had to be a foreshadowing of some sort. So with the disembodied like mustaches often a symbol of authority or like patriarchy. By separating that one facial feature out from the rest of the person, I think it's a way of showing how modern bureaucratic systems execute authority in ways that are very detached and dehumanizing and impersonal. Magritte's Golconda actually used kind of similar imagery with its identical, faceless, bowler-hatted men to depict how modern bureaucracy has this way of turning people into these standardized, interchangeable units to the point where they're no longer really human, and in that way inflicts violence, psychological violence, through forced conformity. Another way to look at it is the way that Hannah Arendt described the essence of bureaucratic violence. So she wrote, "The greater the bureaucratization of public life, the greater will be the attraction of violence. In a fully developed bureaucracy, there is nobody left with whom one could argue, to whom one could present grievances, on whom the pressures of power could be exerted. Bureaucracy is the form of government in which everybody is deprived of political freedom, of the power to act, for the rule by nobody is not no rule, and where all are equally powerless, we have a tyranny without a tyrant. That insight into bureaucratic violence, combined with the symbolism of all of those menacing, faceless, mustached people, gives us a framework for understanding the witch's labyrinth in Madoka as some kind of manifestation of trauma. So the labyrinth, just like a faceless bureaucracy, represents a system where human identity and connection have been completely stripped away, leaving only a very disturbed psychological space where the traumatized individual, so presumably the witch, feels trapped and utterly powerless. The German text that appeared wasn't random either. Germany was at the forefront of developing modern bureaucracy and administrative systems during the 19th century. Combined with the faceless people and the barbed wire in later images, those elements I felt referenced not just the general dehumanization of modernization, but specific historical examples where bureaucratic systems, when taken to extremes, can inflict violence. For example, during World War II in Nazi Germany, what was written on your paperwork literally determined whether you would live or die. And that idea of violence being carried out via these impersonal bureaucratic systems was, I think, really reinforced by everyday tools like scissors being transformed into weapons, suggesting that seemingly benign things can become instruments of violence. When Madoka and Saika encountered that tear in reality while trying to escape, I think it was referencing the fact that to surrealists, dreams get a lot closer to psychological reality than our waking life does. So what we call the real world is just this patchwork of social conventions and cognitive blinders that obscure life's authentic experience. Dreams cut through all of that noise and all of the bullshit and expose reality as it truly is. So what's this reality that the labyrinth was trying to expose? And I think it was exposing the reality of trauma itself. Trauma is a psychological state that really defies conventional logic, hence all of the weird shit that's going on. All of that surreal, twisted, fragmented, distorted stuff is ironically a more honest representation of what a traumatized psyche is like. Just like how surrealist art often featured disconnected body parts and everyday objects placed in these really weird positions to represent how trauma shatters our psychological integrity. The labyrinth was revealing someone's, again, probably the witch's, fractured and traumatized mind, where the alienation and the powerlessness that Arendt described has already been internalized as a psychological prison with no clear escape, and hence why the exits were all sealed when Madoka and Saika tried to escape. All of this suggests something much more complex and sinister than the black and white story that QUBEEYY has been trying to sell. Witches aren't just evil beings, but they seem to be very complex entities who probably once were people, normal people, whose psychological states deteriorated after going through a whole bunch of shitty things. And I love that we were able to get all of that from just studying the surrealist imagery in the Witch's Labyrinth. So once we understand the Witch's Labyrinth as probably a visual metaphor for trauma, it's interesting to see how witches are then used as a stand-in for despair and depression. So in that scene where Mami saved the woman from suicide, the woman's disorientation and her confusion afterwards, it was kind of really ambiguous. So her question of oh, why did I do that, could be interpreted two ways. Either she was genuinely unaware of what drove her to jump off the ledge, which would fit into QUBEEYY and Mami's narrative of how a witch causes things to happen. Or she was someone emerging from a depressive episode, just trying to deal with the shocking realization that she had actually done what she had done. Mami's reassurance that she was just having a bad dream was also significant. Depression itself is sometimes described as this very prolonged nightmare state where reality becomes distorted and you feel trapped, unable to escape. I think the ambiguity is definitely deliberate because I think we're meant to critique defeating witches as a solution to this darkness because it may actually only address the symptoms of depression rather than its causes. Does destroying an external factor like a witch truly address the deeper psychological and societal factors that lead to people's suicidal thoughts. And on a broader level, it's like this powerful critique of how society has sometimes sought these quick fixes for mental health crises without really addressing the underlying causes that lead people to such despair in the first place. Knowing that the Witch's Labyrinth is trying to tell us that not all is as it seems, I'm just going to say it. I think QUBEEYY is one sneaky MFer. In fact, did you guys notice that right after the scene where Madoka gave her mum the idea of like taking over as CEO and commented on how scary her face was, we then immediately cut to QUBEEYY's face. And I don't think that was a coincidence. My legal spidey senses were just tingling all over as soon as QUBEEYY brought up that magical girl contract and seemingly only presented the positive aspects of agreeing to enter into such a contract. Yes, Mummy did mention that you risk your life because you do have to fight witches, but I don't think even that's the full story. You know, there are no T's and C's explaining what a soul gem is and the risks involved with that. Like, does it literally contain your soul? If it gets destroyed, do you get destroyed? What's the deal with like how it gets corrupted after each fight? How long does this contract last for? Like, what are the conditions for termination, and so on and so forth? To put it mildly, I think the way that QUBEEYY gets girls to sign their lives away is essentially predatory, and it serves as this very depressing allegory for how exploitative systems operate in the real world. I think Madoka needs a bloody lawyer before she signs anything. First of all, it's very clear that QUBEEYY deliberately targets emotionally vulnerable girls because they were surprised at Madoka and Sayaka taking time to consider their wishes, which revealed a disturbing unspoken truth that most girls accept the contract because they are desperate enough to risk their lives for a chance to change what have to be some very dire circumstances. And that sort of calculated targeting also explains why QUBEEYY has been watching Madoka and Sayaka from the start, waiting for the right moment to spring that offer, which is just like how predatory lenders act. You know, they target people in desperate situations, knowing that they will accept terms that they normally wouldn't under less desperate situations. I mean, this shot of QUBEEYY like riding a spiky monster looking like thing, I have no idea what that is, but the shadow on the building looked awfully similar to some of the stuff that's appeared in the Witch's Labyrinth and seemed to suggest that QUBEEYY is not separate from the system that created and perpetuates that world of psychological trauma that I think witches are actually stuck in. Secondly, the most insidious aspect of QUBEEYY's contract and of real-world exploitative systems is the illusion of choice and consent. So at the beginning in Madoka's dream, the offer was framed as become a magical girl to save everything or do nothing and watch everything be destroyed. It's this like false dichotomy and mirrors how exploitative systems frame choices that aren't genuine choices at all. Because can decisions made under duress or while being emotionally manipulated like that be truly consensual? And I think the series, and also like a lot of legal precedent, suggests that they can't. Even if there isn't explicit duress, the way in which magical girls get one wish in return for what seems like a lifelong obligation to fight witches, because again, it was not specified for how long magical girls are duty-bound to fight, is I think similar to the way that a lot of people trade their time and their health and sometimes their dignity for wages that just allow them to barely survive. You know, the choice to work under exploitative conditions isn't truly a choice or isn't truly free when the alternative is poverty and destitution. In fact, when we think about how magical girls need witches' grief seeds to get rid of the corruption that infects their soul gems, it showed how this whole magical girl system is fundamentally cyclical and potentially unsustainable because as soul gems get corrupted through fights, QUBEEYY, I assume, would have to continually recruit fresh girls to replace those whose gems become irretrievably corrupt. And clearly that does happen to some of them, as proven by the existence of witches, who I am now 95% confident used to be magical girls themselves. Again, this mirrors how exploitative systems have to constantly find new participants as previous ones are spent and then discarded, creating this like perpetual cycle of exploitation that serves the system instead of its participants. In fact, I also found it really interesting the way that the system pits magical girls against each other in a competition for limited resources, specifically the grief seeds. It reflects Marx's analysis of how capitalism fosters competition and division among workers, which prevents them from recognizing and then uniting against their common oppressor. I mean, like, holy shit, we could totally analyze the whole contract magical girl system through a Marxist lens. Thirdly, the system relies heavily on actually another Marxist concept, false consciousness, which is the failure of the exploited to recognize their own exploitation due to ideological manipulation. So Qubey deliberately conceals the true nature of the contract, presenting it as beneficial to the girls while holding back the other less desirable aspects of it, like the corruption of the soul gems. We did not get any detail of what exactly that entails. And this deception is amplified then by framing the contract as this altruistic opportunity to, become a magical girl and help people and save the world. That strategy of using idealistic narratives to lure people into fundamentally exploitative arrangements really echoes Michel Foucault's theory of power. So Foucault argued that power isn't just repressive, it's productive, meaning that it subtly creates and sustains different forms of knowledge and discourses and these truths that make exploitation appear kind of natural and inevitable. Power is everywhere and comes from everywhere. So if you can get people to internalize and reproduce systems of domination, they end up perpetuating their own exploitation. They don't need to be coerced. One example that I thought of is like sort of the student loan system, where the truth that higher education is the only path to success, that truth makes taking on massive debt seem rational and necessary. And students don't just accept the system, they actively desire and they buy into it and they reproduce it themselves. False consciousness can also operate through what we might call compassion traps. So when Qubey called out to Madoka for help while Homura was chasing him down, he basically used Madoka's compassion to reel her into this exploitative magical girl system. And that manipulation was shown through some clever visuals, I thought. Like at the start in Madoka's dream, she was desperately looking for an exit because her subconscious sensed danger. Remember the surrealist belief that dreams can tell us more about the truth of reality than reality itself. But in the real world, when Qubey called out to Madoka for help, she walked towards the danger. Like she literally entered that warehouse/storeroom through an exit sign. So in that way, Madoka's genuine desire to help people, which is a good thing, becomes the very mechanism by which she is subtly maneuvered into the system for her potential exploitation. False consciousness isn't just about lying to people. It's also about taking their best qualities like compassion and kindness and then exploiting them to serve the system's needs. The final thing that makes the whole magical girl system so real and depressing is that it is systemic in nature. Qubey could totally be the evil mastermind of it all, but it could just as well be this normalized, rationalized process that's been in place forever, and Qubey is just one part of it. No wonder why Homura is trying to either kill or capture Qubey, because maybe if you knock Qubey down, you kind of make a big dent in the system. Speaking of Homura, the first time that she interacts with Madoka, or was it the first time, really revealed her intense opposition to this system that Qubey is trying to sustain. Her warning to Madoka to not think about trying to become someone else if she really wants to protect her family and her friends and her very life was clearly a desperate plea against Madoka from becoming a magical girl. I think what made this warning particularly significant was how Homura seems to know Madoka from another life, or maybe another timeline. She's likely lived through several timelines where Madoka's transformation into a magical girl led to disastrous consequences. So her warning wasn't just cautionary advice, it's this desperate attempt to break a recurring cycle of destruction and exploitation. So at its core, Homura's message is F the system, because this system is designed to exploit vulnerable girls like you and me and everyone else who has been entrapped by it. I wanted to bring in this comment from Gift Nova because I think it's super relevant to this idea of bringing down a system in order to create a new, better one. So Giffnova pointed out that the German writing in episode 2 at one point quotes from Goethe's Faust, and that there are in fact a lot of comparisons and references made to Faust and other German terms and phrases sprinkled all throughout the series, especially in relation to witches. Woe, woe, thou hast it destroyed, the beautiful world with powerful fist. In ruin 'tis hurled by the blow of a demigod shattered. The scattered fragments into the void we carry, deploring the beauty perished beyond restoring. Mightier for the children of men, brightlier build it again. In thine own bosom build it anew. Bid the new career commence with clearer sense and the new songs of cheer be sung thereto. The main thrust of this passage, I think, expresses one of Goethe's key philosophical ideas, which is that progress requires destroying existing structures before something better can emerge from the ruins of the old system. Destruction is painful. The first part of that poem mourns the loss of the beauty of the old world, but destruction can also catalyze personal and then societal rebirth and renewal. I think Goethe and potentially Madoka both explore how building a better world or system requires breaking these destructive patterns instead of just repeating them. We still don't know who has to do the breaking in Madoka, or how they're going to do it, or what kind of world it is that they want to replace the old with, but I am excited to find out. The last thing that I wanted to comment on was the absolute whiplash going from these apocalyptic dreamscapes to then just a very sunny, picture perfect, very cute family breakfast scene. Even I think the music gives us sonic whiplash. The very happy, light music playing when Madoka is at home and also at school is so different to the epic, orchestral, operatic music that's playing when, say, Homura's fighting in Madoka's dream, or whenever we're in the witch's labyrinth. I like how these constant jarring shifts create a very palpable sort of dramatic tension. We as the audience recognize the fragility of Madoka's very comfortable everyday life, while she herself remains oblivious to the horrors that are just lurking beneath the surface, at least for now anyway. This contrast also mirrors how our own minds function. Think about how we navigate our personal worlds. We wake up in the morning, we make breakfast, we chat to our family and friends, we worry about all these everyday trivial things. And at the same time, we are living in a world where global systems of exploitation and environmental collapse and human rights violations rage on and on and on. Our daily routines become a kind of psychological buffer from all of that. They allow us to maintain some sort of emotional equilibrium. It's not that we intentionally ignore, sometimes we do, but most of the time we're not intentionally ignoring all of the terrible shit that's going on out there. I think we just all go insane if our brains did not develop the ability to filter out that constant 24/7 awareness of global suffering and existential threats. So domestic bliss and impending cosmic catastrophe exist simultaneously in Madoka's world, just as they do in ours. We've just evolved mechanisms to compartmentalize different levels of reality. It's really a survival technique. All right, guys, let's start episode 3 in 3, 2, 1, play. Oh, we did see a quick flashback of this. So this is actually someone that Sayaka knows. Sibling? That is a huge hospital room, by the way. It's looks like a library. Oh, no. This is the reason why Sayaka's gonna become a magical girl, I guess. As a violinist, that image of the boy, her friend's fingers moving, and it's like saying goodbye to what you once used to be able to do. Clearly something that they used to be super passionate about, probably lives for, and now they're just stuck in this hospital bed. Yeah, that really hit hard. Man, I think it makes me think of the scene where Sayaka's like, oh, we need to think a little bit more about what our wish might be because some of us haven't really been through a lot of misfortune. But actually, she is in really close contact with someone who has clearly suffered a great deal. So, man, Qubey knew. Qubey bin knew that Sayaka would want to make a wish, if not for herself, then at least for a friend. Qubey is so sus. It is interesting to think about why Mummy uses like single shot guns. Like, does it have something to do with her tragic story and her wish? The familiars. Wow. I mean, is Cube some like mutated witch too? Just a very highly developed form, manipulative form. Oh my god, that is the worst. Cube literally just like sidled up after she had a terrible traffic accident. Oh my god, that is terrible. How is she still friends with Cube? Because they might not want it. Yeah. That is a question. Man, I wonder if mommy's ever like. Sometimes there are some days when I think it would have been better had I died instead of having to constantly fight. Ye- oh, God, Cube is the worst. My God, Cube. Uh-huh. I mean, but Qubei's just always there. Just like watching, just waiting. Look at how the shadow is just over Qubei's face. Oh god, every time it goes up close to Qubei's face. Oh my god. That's so ominous. Qubei's just like salivating at the thought of getting this soul gem out of Madoka. Whoa, mom. They're acting like this happens all the time because it probably does. Yeah, I know people like that. Hmm. Here we go about dreams again. She's like, I could live my dream of being a magical girl, even though it's gonna be tough. Man, she can morph her soul gem. Mommy is like an enabler. The sass. No, Homura. I believe in Homura. I think she is trying to do the right thing. Okay, that definitely looks like someone's soul gem that's turning into a grief seed. Oh no, is she gonna make the contract now? Oh god, man. Cube's like, this is my chance to make another soul gem. I'm sorry if I'm sussing QUBEEYY too much. Like, they actually might just be wanting to help. Oh man, it's the hospital. There are all these images of her wish. Uh, the syringes. What is that symbol? Pill bottles. It's those scissors again, just in a different, like, dream. Snack foods? Oh, come on. Ah, this is not helping. Why is she wrapped up like a gift? uh, Mummy is not, does not have purely altruistic motives. I mean, I think that much is clear. Yeah, that was this outline of the symbol. I mean, is this Kamijo-kun's nightmare? But world peace. I mean, that is so, like, pure. No wonder why the soul gem is going to be more powerful than anyone else's. Because she does, it's not like a selfish wish. I don't know. I don't know if you want to become like mummy. Mm. I like birthday cake candles. No, maybe if she makes a contract without actually demanding anything, it creates this out, for later. No. Because if she makes a contract without demanding anything, and then she gets made into a magical girl, she can be like, "Well, you didn't actually give me anything, so I can break this contract now." Just the lawyer in me. I mean, I guess they were near the hospital, so it makes sense that whoever's, having these depressing thoughts would be having them about hospital settings and syringes and cake. I don't know about the cake. Is it like they can't have these nice things anymore because like you have to live on a hospital diet? Sometimes when you're sick, you can't eat the things that you want. Yo, a chocolate flavor. Charlotte. Oh, I didn't see the last name. Um, no. Oh my god. Ugh. Scary clown face. Oh my god. Yo, did she get consumed? Oh, oh my god. Oh my god, she's getting mauled. Qubey, did you set this up? Oh shit, is that the last we saw of Mummy? Oh my god. Oh my god. Homura's not even facing it. She like sensing it sonically. Yo. Okay, I got some Lego pieces. Just a lot of candy. Oh, is that actual blood? Oh, so that was Mummy's soul gem, but it's completely blackened now because he got chomped up, I guess. Then, I mean, how does that make it different from a grief seed? Oh shit. Oh my, I. Yo, did it not feel like that just like whipped past at super speed? Man, so Mami is just gone. She's gone. I mean, other than like her soul gem, which is now in the possession of Homura. I was so sad, honestly, when she was talking about how she didn't have any choice in becoming a magical girl. Like, it was either die in this horrible way, it looked like some sort of traffic incident, or become a magical girl. And she still died in the most horrific way that you could imagine. You know, the thing that really stuck out to me the most through this episode was just all of QUBEEYY's actions. They sniff out opportunities. They sniff out desperation. You know, what we talked about. It's like, is someone desperate? I'm going to sidle up to them and be like, become a magical girl. Help me turn you into a soul gem that I can use. I do feel like we got some huge insight into why Madoka may be the potential circuit breaker for this whole system that seems to just go through magical girls. Like, you know, they just churn through magical girls and has to keep being sustained by new girls. And the reason why Madoka is special is because she doesn't want anything other than to help people. That being said, though, Homura still seems to think that Madoka becoming a magical girl is a terrible, terrible idea. And I wouldn't discount that also being a reality, that maybe because Madoka has these altruistic, pure motives, leading to her soul gem becoming one of the more powerful ones, that actually supercharges the exploitative system as opposed to tearing it down, and Homura is trying to prevent that. So I don't know. In terms of this latest witch's labyrinth that we were drawn into with all of the hospital imagery and the syringes and the pill bottles and stuff, I can't help but think that it's probably someone who, like Sayaka's friend, was someone who was just committed to the hospital and just had a really awful existence, just trying to survive day by day as a really sick person. The cake and the candy, I mean, I did guess. I still think that it's probably, you know, all the things that they had to give up because of their illness. The idea that Sayaka is going to become a magical girl just for the sake of perhaps wishing for her friend to be made better, that's a very real possibility. I actually think she's going to go through ahead with it. But the thing that Mummy warned her to think about, that is, does she actually want to help her friend, or is she more wanting to be the person that grants her friend's wish? Because that is very different, I think, will come and bite Sayaka in the ass later on. Because there seems to be this division line between, is your wish a selfish wish, or is it a wish that is, like Madoka, honestly altruistic? And that somehow the nature of your wish determines like your trajectory as a magical girl, which means that if Sayaka makes this wish for her friend to be better and kind of expects gratitude, I guess, in return, or kind of deep down made that wish in order for herself to be gratified, maybe it increases the chances of Sayaka turning into a witch. Or maybe the more selfish your wish, the more witches you have to fight in order to, I guess, get rid of the corruption in your soul gem. I don't know. All I know is that there is no free lunch. You know, there is always a cost to every single decision that is being made in this world. I mean, even in the real world sometimes, you know, it's like everything you do has ripple effects, even though you may not see it at the time. I'm still in shock, I think, of having seen Mummy get decapitated by a worm with a clown face. I don't know. If I was Sayaka and Madoka, I'd be like, yeah, I've learned my lesson. I'm turning away from this whole magical girl business. I mean, we will get to see Mummy again, right? In some form. Maybe she becomes a witch. Okay. All right. Let's do this in 3, 2, 1. play. Yo, was Kamijo related to that witch's labyrinth somehow? Sad, sad cello. That's beautiful though. But why? The violin, it's like requires your upper body, right? There are violinists who have lost the function of their legs. What? Maybe there's something else. Like something about his condition means that he can't keep up with the rigors of, a professional violinist schedule. That would make sense. Sayaka, I don't think Sayaka is horrible. I think it's just human. I mean, I'm sorry. God, it's just going to be one tragic story after the other, right? Because I'm assuming we will meet more magical girls that have been pulled into Qubey's system. God, this OP is way too cheerful for the kind of story that this is turning into. uh, it is thought provoking, though, to consider what Sayaka's struggling with at the moment is yes, you want to help someone, but if you really plumb the depths of your thoughts and your true desires, it's like maybe you do want something more than a simple thank you. Like maybe you want to be acknowledged as some sort of hero, or I don't know, you feel like that person then becomes obligated to you because you helped them, even though they may not have ever asked you for your help. Like, it's all of these intrusive thoughts that crowd in and make you doubt your motives. And that's what being a human is like. It's like, can you really know your truest desires? At least she's being honest with herself, Some people are just in denial about their true motives. God, that looks like mommy's gem. Oh no. Oh god. Yeah, that happened. How is she even functioning? Like, she cannot go on with normal life after having witnessed that. Oh, Dad, come on. It's not the eggs. Sayaka is really good at covering up trauma. I take that back. She is really good at being in denial of it. Ugh. Uh, oh god. What class is this? Homura also looks super drained. I do have a theory about Homura, but we can talk about that later. This is her reality being taken apart. Quite violently, actually. It's also really disturbing that Qubei's face never changes. Mm, it's like waking up from the Matrix. You can't go back. Well, you can, but why do they have to have such close-up shots of Qubei's face? Yeah, we're not seeing Mummy come back. I mean, this is not that kind of show. It does not pull punches. I mean, who's going to protect everyone from Qubey? Mm. I mean, because if they don't fight and get grief seeds, they themselves turn, right? God, the more times Qubei says that, I can't pressure you into it, the more I'm disinclined to believe. It's not even hiding the fact that they're hunting girls. Was it fun, Qubei? Was it fun watching mommy get chomped up by a clown worm? Jeez. Is anyone gonna notice that mummy no longer shows up to school? Like, do you notice the patterns on her wallpaper also kind of look like either a soul gem or a grief seed? Maybe both. I don't know. I'm gonna give our girl a hug. Okay, that's better. She needs someone to tell it's not her fault. I will kill them. Madoka. Hmm. Oh, so mummy would have ended up. I mean, Madoka would have ended up like Mummy, probably. I mean, maybe all magical girls end up like that, one way or another. I mean, that's why she is the way that she is. I guess they just become like missing. Yeah. And with such certainty too, like it's not that it could happen, it's like you will end up like that. Homura knows. I am glad Madoka's listening to her. Oh, at least she has that. Wait, what was that? That it felt like sounded like something shifted. I feel like this is such a true allegory for the real world. It's like the world is shitty and you can find people who are genuinely trying to do good, but in the end, it doesn't matter. The world remains shitty, I guess is the general gist. But it still matters. Like, I believe it matters. It makes a difference. Are you tired? God. Uh, you notice a pattern on the carpet as well. It's like a witch's symbol. The doctors. Oh, so it has impacted the hand. Oh God. Oh my god, QUBEEYY. Just listening in, just waiting for the right moment to be like, sign here. Madoka. It's all about communication, that's true. Oh, okay. It does seem like they are actually out of their bodies. Like they're fully not in control. Oh, this is like a mass attack? Why is this a thing? Why? Should have learned from last time. Save your numbers. Oh god. Okay, so all of these people are already in some pretty rough situations. So Witch comes along and kind of uses that as fuel. uh, I was like, what if there was something flammable down there? It would have just like exploded the entire building. Okay, so they're like certified zombies. But the witch wouldn't have power of them if they weren't already in that depressive state, I assume. Kirsten. God, they all have names. Okay, on a film strip, the circuses. Some kind of like person who's in the entertainment industry. Yeah. Oh, was this like an idol? Someone who used to be an idol, and then like the pressures of idol life got to them. But it's weird because in these labyrinths, they kind of reflect the person's who's stuck inside the labyrinth psyche as well. It's not just the witches. What? Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my god. Drawn and quartered? Oh shit. Sayaka did it. Yo, how did she get so powerful so quickly? I guess you just get kind of imbued with power. You don't need training. There's no training arc. Homura was there too? Yep. She's like, you idiot. Oh no. Yo. It's a redhead. uh, it's so like, yeah, on the one hand, you can blame the magical girls who are just in it for themselves, you know, for the power, the prestige, the just being top dog. The thing is though, I think behind every magical girl's journey or story or motivation, underlying it will always be that thread of desperation, and it will always make them in some sense understandable. It may not be an excuse for them to continue in perpetuating this sort of selfish and competitive and destructive behavior, but I think you could draw a direct line from their initial suffering and desperate conditions straight to why it is that they're like this now. So even like with Kyoko, okay, we barely met her for like 2 minutes. I'm sure that behind her seeming brash propensity for violence is some sort of tragedy that led her to be what she is like now. I am glad that Madoka has Homura on her side. Even just the fact that Homura came to find her to make sure that she knew that it wasn't Madoka's fault how this all panned out, that she doesn't have to feel guilty for not immediately stepping into Mummy's shoes. Obviously, because apparently someone needs to look after this section of the city now that she's gone. And of course, as everyone could probably have guessed, Sayaka is now a magical girl. And it seemed that her wish really was for her friend to be healed so that he can, I guess, pick up a violin again and play to his heart's content. It didn't seem, though, the way that the shot was framed, like the very last scene where he wakes up and he discovers that his strength has returned to his arm, to his hand. It was not painted in a very positive lighting. The music itself was ominous. It seems that this will not turn out the way that Sayaka intended it to. I mean, I can't think of why Kamijo-kun wouldn't be ecstatic that he is now restored to full health. There must be some catch. I just don't know yet what that is. The murder in Homura's eyes when she had confirmed that Sayaka had indeed signed the contract to become a magical girl was like, you could just eat it up. You'd think that she only cared that it was Madoka who listened to her to not become a magical girl, which she has, but it does seem like every time the system eats up another girl or manages to convince someone to sign up to get powers, it still hurts Homura, you know? It's not just Madoka that she cares about, even though it seems like she cares about Madoka the most. It does seem like Homura has it out for the system itself, and she doesn't want it to be perpetuated anymore. Like, she doesn't want any single girl to suffer again like she has. I did have this thought of Homura as being quite reluctant to battle witches, even though it may not seem like it. But even more so to transfer her own corruption to the witch's grief seed. And I don't know why I had that. Well, I do know why I had that thought. It was in that scene when Mummy was like, tossed her the grief seed, or wanted to toss her the grief seed, and was like, yeah, you take it, because, you know, you probably need it more than I do. And Homura was like, nope, no thank you. You could have read it as her just really disliking Mummy and not wanting to take anything from her, but it also could be read as Homura being keenly aware that the witch used to be a magical girl, and she wants to no more add to the suffering of the witch by transferring the black corruption of her own soul gem onto the grief seed. So I don't know, it's just a hunch. Like, she will only do the bare minimum to preserve herself, to stop her own soul gem from being darkened and then from being taken out of action, so that she can continue this fight against the system. I just want to make one last note about how Qubey kept saying, look, I'm in no position to pressure you two. You guys just make your own decisions. Like, I'm fine either way. It was the untruthfulness with which that was said. Technically, on a very superficial level, that may be true. Qubey just has to sit to one side and wait until they ask for them to make them into a magical girl. All Qubey has to do, really, that doesn't lessen the degree of manipulation that is required to rope someone into becoming a magical girl, is to find someone who has a desperate reason to want to change their lives or the life of someone they really care about for the better. Just the fact that Qubey puts himself in such a position and dangles this hope of salvation or hope of renewal is enough. Just going back to that predatory lender example, often the lender doesn't create the situations in which people find themselves in, you know, huge debt. They go to lenders because they're in such desperate situations, but the lender doesn't help the situation. They exploit the situation and often make it worse. It would be so funny if Qubey actually ends up to be the hero of this story. And I've just been hating on them since not since the beginning, because it did take me at least, you know, the first 2 episodes to kind of sense that something wasn't quite right in the way that Qubey was pushing this whole magical girl contract. You guys can give me a hard time at the end of the series when it turns out that Qubey actually, you know, was doing everyone a favor. Thank you again for watching this with me and for discussing the themes that I think are coming through really strong in Madoka. And I look forward to reading more of your thoughts as we continue on. Have a great rest of the day and take care.